Honduran candidates for the National Congress denounced alleged fraud committed by the National Electoral Council. Argentine President Alberto Fernandez said progress is being made in the talks with the International Monetary Fund to refinance a $44 billion debt. The Lebanese Minister of Information resigned on Friday in a bid to end the diplomatic crisis with several Gulf nations. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. We begin in Honduras, where the transparency praised in the presidential election differs from the situation reported by candidates for Congress. Several candidates for the National Congress have denounced alleged fraud committed by the National Electoral Council. They pointed to an alleged criminal network which they accused of inflating, disappearing and modifying the votes to facilitate the election of influential and above all controversial political figures from the parties that participated in the elections held on November 28th. According to the accusations, this fraud did not result in a significant change in terms of the numbers of lawmakers elected for each party, but rather favoured particular candidates within the ruling National Party.
What we are asking is to review those voting records, to review the votes of some ballot boxes in which we have doubts, and that finally the will of the Honduran people be respected. It is useless for us to get to the National Congress if we are not going to have that qualified majority to repeal the penal code, the CD law, and all that corrupt legislation they have created, the law of secrets. Therefore, if we do not dismantle these wicked constructions, it will be of no use to us to have a minimum representation in the Congress, where the only thing we are going to do is to see how they continue to divide the country as they see fit.
In Chile, a recent poll revealed that the presidential candidate for the leftist Apruebo Dignidad coalition, Gabriel Boric, would become president if the elections were held this Sunday. The latest poll showed that Boric was set to secure 54% of the votes, compared to 46% for his far-right opponent, José Antonio Cast. The poll also showed that the approval rating for current President Sebastián Piñera is just 18%. The survey was conducted between November 25th and 29th on adults throughout the country. Chileans go to the polls on December 19th. Peruvian President Pedro Castillo called for the unity of the population and summoned all the country's political parties to dialogue, while stressing that he will defend democracy no matter the cost. The head of state has seen a series of attacks by right-wing sectors, including calls for his impeachment, as the traditional political parties of the country seek to make it impossible for him to govern. Castillo denounced the widespread corruption among the political elite and the smear campaign against his government led by opposition sectors and the media. He also stated he would stand firm in reviewing the contracts with private companies that manage public resources, and reiterated the intention to renegotiate contracts with the transnational consortium that exploits the Camisea gas fields.
Therefore, I would like to announce that I have taken the decision to summon the leaders of the political parties represented in the Congress of the Republic, so that starting tomorrow, they can come to the President's office to discuss the major issues that the country is facing, such as reactivating the economy, how to fight the pandemic, the actions and responses to the earthquake in Amazonas, and also to see about political stability and governance.
The 2021 Cuba Business Forum, the most important event of the year for the country in terms of trade and investment, concluded on Friday after 4 days of exchanges among representatives of various organizations and sectors. The event gathered about 3,000 participants from 86 countries, including government officials, chambers of commerce, trade and investment agencies, Cuban and foreign business people who followed the sessions online, seeking to strengthen and establish new relationships. The final day of sessions included an exchange with foreign companies about business opportunities in Cuban tourism, the biopharmaceutical industry, agriculture and renewable energies. The forum also included a panel dedicated to the opportunities for Cuban nationals living abroad to do business and invest in the country.
A total of 1,162 appointments were arranged between visitors and participants through the forum's platform. Qualitatively, the second business forum was also superior, as it included presentations by distinguished protagonists of the main transformations taking place in the country and panels where the current issues of our economy were addressed.
Cuba celebrates Latin American Medicine Day this Friday, a date on which it pays tribute to all medical and health workers. The date commemorates the birth in 1833 of the famous Cuban epidemiologist and researcher Carlos Juan Finlay, who discovered the agent that transmits yellow fever, the Aedes aegypti mosquito. This year's celebrations pay particular tribute to all those who fought against the COVID-19 pandemic, while Cuba's solidarity with other nations in this struggle is recalled. Cuba has also played a leading role in training medical staff for the region at its Latin American School of Medicine. And we'll be right back after this very short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Argentine President Alberto Fernandez said progress is being made in the talks with the International Monetary Fund to refinance a $44 billion debt. The country is also demanding an evaluation of the 2018 loan, the largest ever granted by the organization, as a step prior to the agreement.
We will face the debts that others have generated. This agreement will not be at the expense of the country's development or based on any adjustment program. We continue to negotiate with the International Monetary Fund with firm steps and a steady pulse. The debt problem is not a problem of Alberto Fernandez's government. It is a problem of Argentina as a whole. We are not working to get rid of a problem. My responsibility is to work so that the debt does not postpone Argentine development any longer. Growth is needed to fulfill the commitments taken on. Any other logic is only a chimera.
Brazil registers an urban housing deficit in the millions. We have more details with our correspondent Brian Meir.
Brazil has an urban housing deficit of over 6 million units. Now, this was caused by agribusiness land grabs that took place in the rural Northeast between the 1950s and the 1980s, forcing huge numbers of people to migrate to the cities in the south and southeast, like Rio and Sao Paulo, which saw its population grow from 1.5 million to over 24 million in the urban area between 1950 and the year 2020. As a result of this massive migration, favelas formed, which are informal settlements like the one I'm standing in right now, where people just occupied land and built their own houses, often in precarious locations prone to flooding and landslides. The National Urban Reform Forum has done a study which proves that there's over 5.6 million potential housing units available in Brazil just in empty buildings in the downtown areas of its cities. This is caused by real estate speculation, land banking, and in a lot of times it's empty government buildings. Now, the housing movement fought during the 1980s to include language in the Brazilian Constitution guaranteeing the right for people to occupy abandoned buildings in which the owners haven't paid their real estate taxes for more than 5 years. And this has led to the growth of all kinds of social movements that organize these squatting activities and then lobby with the local governments to force them to convert it into ownership-based low-income housing. This week in Sao Paulo, the Frente de Luta pra Moradia, or FLM as it's known, coordinated the occupation of 10 buildings in the downtown Sao Paulo area, with hundreds of families now waiting and demanding their constitutionally granted right to housing, which, according to the Brazilian Constitution of 1988, overrides any kind of profit interest.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi co-chaired the third ministerial meeting of the Forum of China and the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, alongside his Mexican counterpart Marcelo Ebrard this Friday. The meeting was held by video link and served not only to highlight economic ties, but also cultural and technological cooperation, as well as initiatives linked to caring for the environment. In the first 3 quarters of 2021, trade between China and the Latin American and Caribbean region amounted to over $300 billion, a remarkable increase of 45.5% year-on-year, according to latest data. In the past years and in the context of the pandemic, trade cooperation with China has been intensified thanks to China's decision to exchange experience in the scientific field and to donate and deliver medical supplies. The China CELAC Forum also supports the principles of foreign relations based on win-win cooperation, mutual respect, non-interference in the internal affairs of countries, and cooperation for regional growth. Chinese President Xi Jinping addressed the third ministers' meeting of the Forum of China and the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States via video link on Friday, noting the mutual benefits of cooperation.
History tells us that peaceful development, fairness and justice and win-win cooperation are the right path for mankind. Both China and Latin American countries are developing countries and are comprehensive cooperative partners with equality, mutual benefit and common development. The common dream of independence, development and rejuvenation unites us closely. Let us jointly draw up a blueprint for China-Latin America relations, add momentum to China-Latin America cooperation, and make new contributions to enhancing the well-being of the Chinese and Latin American people and the cause of human progress.
Russia and the United States are working to organize a meeting via video conference between Presidents Vladimir Putin and Joe Biden. The news was disclosed by the Kremlin and comes amid a spike in tensions between the two powers over the military escalation in Ukraine. Kiev is demanding that NATO refuse all Russian petitions of guarantees. Press Secretary for the Russian presidency, Dmitry Peskov, said none of the parties have been able to agree on an exact date of mutual convenience for the talks. Putin and Biden met earlier this year in Geneva and at that time also discussed the situation in Ukraine. NATO's escalation against Russia and its allies continues. On Thursday, the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada and the European Union imposed fresh sanctions against Belarus over alleged electoral fraud. Western powers have been targeting Belarus since President Alexander Lukashenko won a sixth term in office in last year's election. The US Treasury Department designated 3 aircrafts as blocked property and sanctioned several Belarusian state-owned companies, government officials and others who support Lukashenko's government. The European Union, meanwhile, imposed travel bans and asset freezes on 17 more individuals, including senior border and military officials, government representatives and judges. And Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has ruled out expelling European Union diplomats in response to the new sanctions imposed on his country by the bloc. The president noted that any response to the latest measures will be in accordance with international norms and indicated that Minsk will take measures to limit the impact of Western sanctions on the population. Tensions between Minsk and the European Union have escalated due to a sudden interest in the bloc regarding the numbers of people trying to cross into Poland from Belarus in what it's labelled a migration crisis. Instead of offering shelter and a possibility of asylum to those trying to enter the EU, the bloc has sought to blame Belarus for the situation. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The Lebanese Minister of Information, George Kordahi, resigned on Friday in a bid to end the diplomatic crisis with several Gulf nations. The resignation comes after Kordahi's comments on the Yemen war prompted a reaction from Saudi Arabia and its allies in the Gulf, who cut off diplomatic ties. The row threatened to further aggravate the situation in Lebanon, a country experiencing a historic economic crisis and dependent on regional neighbours for support. Kordahi told reporters that his resignation was agreed with Prime Minister Najib Mikati, seeking to relieve tensions with Gulf countries in an effort to guarantee a resumption of bilateral ties.
I decided that the time was right because we are offering something that could provide Lebanon with an exit out of this crisis. I hope this resignation opens a window or a recess in that wall towards improved ties with Gulf countries.
The talks on reviving the Iran nuclear deal in Vienna have paused so that European diplomats can review the proposals made by Iran. The talks are expected to resume on Monday, according to diplomatic sources. Iran submitted 2 draft proposals for the nuclear agreement, which include the lifting of US sanctions, a move the nation has stressed is not negotiable. Talks resumed in the Austrian capital on Monday after a 5-month break, as European powers seek to salvage the deal that has been in tatters since the US unilaterally withdrew in 2018. Gambians go to the polls on Saturday to elect a new president in the first election since former leader Yahya Jammeh fled into exile nearly 5 years ago. Jammeh was forced into exile in Equatorial Guinea in January 2017 after President Adama Barrow, then a relative unknown, defeated him at the ballot box. His possible return from exile and how the country should respond to the litany of alleged crimes under his rule have been central themes of the election campaign. Meanwhile, voters in the tiny nation, the smallest on mainland Africa, expressed concern about improving living conditions. Expectations that economic circumstances would improve have not been fulfilled, and the COVID pandemic delivered a severe blow to the country's tourism-reliant economy. The Gambia is one of the poorest countries in the world.
This election is something else. I never seen this kind of election here before. This one is very interesting. People are interested, and even the campaign, if you see the campaign, with the way people are campaigning is even different.
Since Jammeh went to the Gambia, even Gambia itself is not safe. Before, what we don't see in in Jammeh government, since Barrow came into the power, we are seeing those kind of things. You know, people are stabbing each other, and then robbery, many more. When you are in your house, you know, they used to break your door or your windows and take your properties, which was not happening in Jammeh regime. Yeah, we are disappointed about, you know, their government.
Right now, the daily basic is we don't have price control here. There is no price control. Everything is high. Like I'm saying, I'm just from the shop. You can use no more. You can't even take $20 to buy food anymore in here. Things are very high and difficult.
South African scientists have concluded that the current vaccines against COVID-19 work against severe COVID by the Omicron variant. The Network for Genomic Surveillance in South Africa presented the preliminary results of a study into the Omicron variant to the Health Committee of the South African Parliament, noting that vaccines are the tool that can prevent the disease from becoming severe and requiring hospitalization. Preliminary advances in the study indicate that PCR testing can tell whether infection is with the new mutation without having to segment the genome. South Africa is experiencing a surge in COVID cases in what scientists believe is the start of a fourth wave of the pandemic. Mexico has confirmed its first case of the Omicron variant of COVID-19. President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has called for calm and told citizens to trust in vaccines.
Apparently, there is a Mexican who was in South Africa admitted to a private hospital with symptoms of COVID. They did the test, and apparently it is already this new variant. It has already become clear that the vaccine does protect against all variants, so there should be no concern, and much less sensationalism.
India announced its first 2 cases of the Omicron COVID-19 variant, months after a devastating wave of the virus killed more than 200,000 people around the country. A top health ministry official said 2 men had tested positive to the variant. Local authorities reported that neither of the 2 identified cases had been in contact with each other, and 1 had no recent travel history. India has yet to impose international travel bans, but on Monday the Health Ministry ordered all inbound travellers from high-risk countries to undergo mandatory post-arrival COVID testing, along with the random testing of other international arrivals. India has reported the world's second highest number of cases at more than 34 million confirmed infections. Its death toll of nearly 470,000 is the 3rd highest, behind the United States and Brazil.
Now for the past 1 week, the number of beneficiaries who are getting vaccinated are in terms of hundreds, about 300, more than that every day. So because of awareness and government has insisted for the vaccination.
I want to prevent disease from everything. I want to fight against COVID and new wave, Omicron. I want to fight with the...
The World Health Organization disclosed that it still has no reports of Omicron-related deaths, as scientists work to establish how serious the new variant could be.
I have not seen reports of Omicron-related deaths yet. Talking about Omicron, let's also not forget that the predominant variant right now still remains the Delta variant. So Omicron may be on the rise, and we may come to a point where it takes over to be the dominant variant, but at this point the very dominant variant remains Delta, and we have to protect ourselves against Delta, against COVID-19, And the measures that work against Delta work so far, as we know, mostly also against Omicron.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many of our stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.